David had been working alone at the radio telescope station in the desert for 3 months. It was a lonely job, but he loved listening to the sounds of space every night. He would sit in the small control room, watching numbers dance across his computer screen and listening to the static that came from distant stars. The desert was quiet except for the gentle hum of his equipment. David liked it this way. No traffic, no people talking, just him and the endless sky above. He had chosen this job because he wanted to find something amazing out there among the stars. It was past midnight when everything changed. David was drinking his 4th cup of coffee and checking the usual signals when his computer started beeping in a way he had never heard before. The sound was different, not the random noise he was used to, but something that seemed to have a pattern. He leaned forward in his chair, pushing his glasses up his nose. The numbers on his screen were jumping around like crazy. This wasn't normal space static. This was something else entirely. What in the world? David whispered to himself. He had been doing this job for 5 years, and he had never seen anything like this. The signal was coming from somewhere beyond our solar system, but it wasn't behaving like natural space sounds. It had a rhythm to it, almost like someone was trying to send a message. David's heart started beating faster. Could this be what every scientist dreamed of finding? He quickly started recording everything and began trying to figure out what the pattern meant. For 2 hours, he worked on the signal. He tried every code-breaking technique he knew. The pattern was complex but seemed logical, like a language he couldn't understand yet. Just when he thought he was getting close to solving it, all his equipment suddenly went crazy. The lights in the control room started flickering. His computer screens began showing strange symbols instead of numbers. The radio telescope outside started moving on its own, turning toward a part of the sky that David hadn't programmed it to look at. "This can't be happening," David said, standing up so fast his chair rolled backward. That's when he saw the light. Through the window of his control room, David could see something glowing in the distance. It wasn't the moon or any star he recognized. This light was moving, floating just above the desert floor about 100 yards away from his station. David's mouth went dry. His logical scientist brain was telling him this had to be some kind of equipment malfunction, or maybe a weather balloon. But deep down, he knew this was something completely different. The light grew brighter and started moving closer to this building. David could see that it wasn't just a ball of light. There was a shape inside it, like a person walking within a glowing bubble. He wanted to run, but his feet wouldn't move. He wanted to call someone, but his phone had no signal. All he could do was watch as this impossible thing approached his station. The shape became clearer as it got closer. It looked like a woman, but something was off about her appearance. She was tall and moved in a way that seemed to flow rather than walk. Her skin seemed to have a slight glow to it, and her eyes were larger than any human eyes David had ever seen. When she reached the window of his control room, she stopped and looked directly at him. David felt like his heart might stop beating. He was looking at something that definitely wasn't human. But she didn't seem dangerous. There was intelligence in her eyes, curiosity even. Then something incredible happened. David heard a voice in his head, but not through his ears. It was like someone was speaking directly to his thoughts. "Do not be afraid." The voice said gently, "I have been listening to your work." David's legs felt weak, and he had to grab onto his desk to keep from falling down. This couldn't be real. Things like this only happen in movies. You're not human," David managed to say out loud, though he wasn't sure she could hear him through the window. "No," came the voice in his head again. "I am from very far away. My name is something you could not pronounce, but you may call me Luna." Luna. The name seemed to fit somehow. David took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. If this was really happening, he needed to think like the scientist he was trained to be. "How are you talking to me?" David asked. "The same way I have been studying your radio signals." Luna replied, "My people have ways of communication that yours have not yet discovered." David looked at his equipment, which was still showing those strange symbols on the screens. "You've been watching us, watching and learning. Your planet sends many signals into space. Most are meaningless to us, But your work here is different. You search for answers to big questions. This interests my people. Luna moved closer to the window, and David could see her more clearly now, despite her strange appearance. There was something beautiful about her. Her features were delicate but strong, and those large eyes seemed to hold wisdom that went far beyond her apparent age. "What do you want from me?" David asked. Luna tilted her head slightly, like she was thinking about how to answer. "I want to understand you better. Your species is young, but you show promise. You, specifically, show promise, me. But I'm just one person working alone in the desert." "Exactly," Luna said. "You chose to spend your life searching for truth, even when it meant being alone. Even when others might think your work is pointless. This tells me something important about who you are." David felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. This was the discovery of a lifetime, but it was also terrifying. His whole understanding of the universe was changing in the span of a few minutes. "What happens now?" he asked. Luna's expression changed to something that might have been a smile, though it was different from a human smile. "Now, if you are willing, I would like to learn more about you, and perhaps you would like to learn about me and my people." David looked around his small control room, then back at Luna. His scientific curiosity was stronger than his fear. This was why he had become an astronomer in the first place, to find something amazing among the stars. "Yes," David said. "I want to learn." Luna nodded. "Good. But first, you should know that meeting me will change your life in ways you cannot imagine. Are you prepared for that?" David thought about his quiet, predictable life. He thought about all the nights he had spent alone, wondering if there was intelligent life somewhere else in the universe. Now that life had come to him, "I think I'm ready," David said, though he had no idea what he was really agreeing to. As Luna began to move away from the window, the voice in his head said, "I will return tomorrow night. Think carefully about whether you truly wish to continue this. Once we begin, there will be no going back to your old life." The glowing light around Luna grew brighter, and then, in an instant, she was gone. David's equipment returned to normal, showing regular space signals again. If it wasn't for the recording device that had been running the whole time, David might have thought he had imagined the entire encounter, but he knew it was real, and he knew that tomorrow night his life would change forever. David couldn't sleep that entire day. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Luna's face and those unusual eyes looking at him. Was he losing his mind? Had the isolation finally gotten to him? But the recording was there on his computer, showing all those strange symbols and the weird signals dot by evening. David was pacing around his small living area like a caged animal. Part of him hoped Luna wouldn't come back so he could convince himself it had all been a dream. But a bigger part of him was excited beyond belief. If this was real, he was about to be part of the most important discovery in human history. As the sun disappeared behind the desert mountains, David sat at his equipment and waited. He tried to work on his regular duties, but his hands were shaking too much to operate anything properly. Every sound made him jump, every shadow made him look twice. At exactly the same time as the night before, his equipment started acting strange again. The familiar beeping returned, and those alien symbols appeared on his screens. David's heart started racing as he looked toward the window. There she was. Luna appeared in the same glowing light, but this time she seemed more solid, more real. She walked right up to the building and, to David's amazement, passed through the wall like it wasn't even there. David nearly fell out of his chair. "How did you do that? Matter is not as solid as your people believe," Luna said inside his head. "With the right understanding, walking through walls is simple." She looked around his control room with curiosity, studying his equipment like a scientist examining something fascinating. David noticed that everything she touched began to glow slightly, as if her presence changed things at a basic level. "You came back," David said, still not quite believing what he was seeing. "I told you I would. Did you think about what I said?" David nodded. "I couldn't think about anything else, but I still don't understand what you want from me." Luna turned to face him directly. When their eyes met, David felt a strange tingling sensation in his mind. like someone was gently touching his thoughts. "I want to test you," Luna said. "My people do not interact with other species lightly. We must be certain that the beings we choose to work with are capable of growth and understanding. Test me how?" Instead of answering with words, Luna held out her hand. In her palm appeared a small, glowing cube that seemed to shift and change shape as David watched it. "This is a puzzle," Luna explained. "Not for your hands, but for your mind. Touch it, and let your thoughts guide you to the solution." David hesitated. Everything in his scientific training told him to be careful, to study this object first, to understand what he was dealing with. But his curiosity was stronger than his caution. The moment David's finger touched the cube, his vision exploded with colors and patterns. He found himself standing in what looked like a vast library, but instead of books, the shelves held glowing spheres of light. Each sphere contained knowledge. And somehow David understood that he needed to find the right combination to solve the puzzle. The problem wasn't written anywhere, but David could feel what it was asking. It wanted him to understand how different forms of life could communicate across the vastness of space. How could beings who had never met find common ground for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes? David explored this mental library. He found spheres containing mathematics, others with music, some with pure emotion. Gradually, he began to see the pattern. Communication wasn't just about language. It was about finding universal truths that any intelligent being could recognize. When David opened his eyes, he was back in his control room. Luna was watching him with what might have been approval. "Interesting," she said. "Most beings tried to solve it with logic alone. You used emotion and intuition as well. This suggests flexibility of thought. Was that the test?" David asked, feeling dizzy from the experience. "That was the first test. There will be others." Over the next hour, Luna presented David with more challenges. Some tested his ability to think in ways he'd never considered before. Others seemed to examine his character, how he would respond to difficult moral choices, whether he could put aside his own interests for a greater good. One test showed him images of his own life, his childhood, his career, his decision to work alone in the desert. Luna seemed to be studying not just his intelligence, but who he was as a person. "Why is this so important?" David asked after completing what felt like his 10th challenge. Luna was quiet for a moment, and David could sense her considering how much to tell him. "My people are very old," she finally said. "We have seen many species destroy themselves as they develop technology. We have also seen some grow into something wonderful. We believe your species is at a crucial point in its development, and you're trying to decide which way we'll go." "Not exactly. We are trying to find individuals who might help guide your species toward the better path. But such individuals must be tested thoroughly. The responsibility is enormous." David felt the weight of what she was saying. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the future of humanity. "What happens if I fail these tests?" David asked. "Then I return to my people and report that Earth is not ready. We wait another 1,000 of your years and try again." The casual way she mentioned 1,000 years reminded David that he was dealing with beings who thought on a completely different scale than humans. "And if I pass?" Luna's expression became unreadable. "Then things become much more complicated." As the night went on, David found himself enjoying the challenges. Each test pushed him to think in new ways, to consider possibilities he'd never imagined. Luna seemed pleased with his progress, though she remained mysterious about what it all meant. "You are not what I expected," Luna admitted as the first light of dawn began to appear on the horizon. "What did you expect? Someone more rigid, more trapped by the limitations of your current science. But you adapt quickly. You accept new ideas without losing your ability to think critically." David felt a surge of pride, but also growing curiosity about Luna herself. "What about you? Are you being tested too?" Luna seemed surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "Well, you're here alone, making contact with a human. Doesn't your own species need to know that you're making good choices?" For the first time, Luna looked uncertain. Yes, in a way. I'm also being evaluated." My superiors want to know if I can properly judge your species' potential. So we're both taking tests. Luna's expression shifted to something that definitely looked like a smile this time. I had not thought of it that way, but yes, we are both trying to prove ourselves. As the sun rose higher, Luna began to fade slightly. I must go soon. The daylight makes it difficult for me to maintain this form in your environment. Will you come back if you wish me to? But David, I must warn you, the test will become more difficult, and if you continue, there will come a point where you cannot simply return to your old life. David looked around his small control room, thinking about his quiet, solitary existence. Then he looked at Luna, this amazing being, who had opened his mind to possibilities he'd never dreamed of. I want to continue, David said without hesitation. Luna nodded. Then I will return tomorrow night, but think carefully about what you are choosing. The path ahead is not an easy one. As Luna disappeared with the rising sun, David realized that for the first time in years, he was truly excited about what the future might hold. David spent the next day in a state of nervous excitement. The tests had been challenging but also thrilling. Each one had pushed him to think beyond the boundaries of normal human experience. But Luna's warning kept echoing in his mind. The tests would get harder, and there might be no going back. When evening came, David found himself looking forward to Luna's arrival with an intensity that surprised him. It wasn't just the scientific discovery anymore. He was genuinely curious about Luna herself, about her people, and about what role he might play in something much bigger than his small desert station. Luna appeared as the last light faded from the sky, but this time something was different. Instead of the glowing energy that had surrounded her before, she seemed more solid, more present. David could see details about her that hadn't been clear before, the way her unusual eyes reflected light, the graceful way she moved, the subtle patterns that seemed to shift across her skin. You look different tonight, David observed. I am allowing myself to be more present in your dimension, Luna explained. The tests I must conduct tonight require closer interaction. What kind of tests? Instead of answering immediately, Luna walked over to David's equipment. She placed her hand on the main console, and suddenly the room filled with soft, musical sounds. The radio telescope outside began moving in slow, deliberate patterns. Tonight, I want to show you something of my world, Luna said, but to do so safely, I need to understand how your mind works when exposed to concepts that have no equivalent in your experience. The air in the room began to shimmer, and David found himself looking at images that seemed to hang in space around them. But these weren't just pictures, they were somehow live, moving and changing as he watched. This is my home, Luna said. David gasped. He was looking at a world that defied everything he thought he knew about planets. Instead of a solid surface, Luna's world seemed to be made of flowing energy and crystalline structures that reached impossibly high into a sky filled with colors that didn't exist on Earth. Beings that looked similar to Luna moved through this landscape, but they seemed to be flying rather than walking. How's this possible? David whispered. Your scientists understand that matter and energy are the same thing. Luna said, my people learn to live as both. We can be solid when we choose, or we can exist as pure consciousness within energy patterns. David watched, fascinated, as the images showed him Luna's people working together on projects that seemed to involve reshaping reality itself. They were building structures that existed in multiple dimensions at once, creating art that was made of living light, and communicating through methods that involved sharing thoughts and emotions directly. But why show me this? David asked. Because tonight's test is about trust and adaptability. I am going to share with you some of my own memories, my own experiences. This has never been done between my species and yours. If your mind cannot handle the connection, you could be seriously hurt. David felt a chill of fear, but also a surge of excitement. What would happen to me? In the worst case, your consciousness could become lost in mine. You would forget who you are, forget your own life. But if the connection works properly, you will understand my people in a way no human ever has. David looked at Luna, studying her face, despite her alien features. He could see genuine concern there. She was taking a risk too. Why would you risk this? David asked. Luna was quiet for a long moment. Because I have been studying your species for many years, and you are different from what I expected to find. Most humans I have observed are focused on immediate concerns, on competition, on protecting themselves from others. But you chose to spend your life reaching toward the stars, seeking connection with something greater than yourself. That doesn't make me special. Lots of scientists do that, yes, but they do it as part of a team, as part of an institution. You chose to do it alone, even when it meant isolation. This suggests something my people value highly, the willingness to seek truth even when it costs you comfort. David felt himself blushing. He'd never thought of his work in those terms. There's something else, Luna continued. In all my observations of humans, I have never encountered one whose thought patterns resonate so closely with my own. When I listen to your mind working through problems, it reminds me of how my own people think. Is that why you chose to contact me? Partly, but also because my mission here is not just to evaluate your species. I am also searching for something specific. What? Luna hesitated, and for the first time, David sensed real uncertainty. From her, my people do not reproduce the way yours do. When we choose to create new life, it requires a deep mental and emotional connection between two beings, whose consciousness can merge completely. For many centuries, I have been unable to find such a connection among my own people. David's heart started beating faster. Are you saying? I am saying that the resonance I sense between our minds suggests possibilities I never expected to find, but I cannot know for certain without a deeper connection. That is what tonight's test is truly about. David sat down heavily in his chair. This was far beyond anything he had imagined. You want to merge consciousness with me, only temporarily, and only if you consent. But yes, that is what I am asking. If the connection works, you will experience life as one of my people experiences it. You will see the universe through my eyes, feel emotions that humans do not have names for, understand concepts that cannot be explained in any human language. And if it doesn't work, then you will remain human, and I will remain alone. David could hear the sadness in Luna's mental voice when she said that last part. Despite her advanced abilities and her alien nature, she was lonely, perhaps lonelier than he had ever been, because at least he had always hoped to find connection with others of his own species. How do we do it? David asked. Luna looked surprised. You agree? I've spent my whole life wondering what else was out there in the universe. Now I have a chance to actually experience it. How could I say no? Luna moved closer to David, close enough that he could see the subtle patterns of light that moved beneath her skin like living tattoos. Place your hands on mine and open your mind completely. Do not try to control your thoughts or emotions. Simply let them flow. David reached out and took Luna's hands. Her skin was warm but felt different from human skin, smoother, with a faint electrical tingle that ran up his arms. Are you ready? Luna asked. David nodded. And suddenly his world exploded into sensation beyond anything he had ever imagined. He was flying through space, but not in a ship. His consciousness itself was moving between the stars. He could feel the gravitational pull of planets, the warm radiation of suns, the cold emptiness of the void between galaxies, and through it all, he was aware of other beings like Luna, their thoughts and emotions flowing around him like a cosmic symphony. But more than that, he could feel Luna's own experiences, her memories and feelings flowing into his mind. He saw her childhood, on that impossible world of living energy. He felt her first attempts to understand human radio signals, her growing fascination with Earth's chaotic but vibrant civilization. And he felt her loneliness, centuries of being unable to form the deep connections that her people required for true fulfillment. She had watched other members of her species find their perfect matches, merge consciousness completely, and create new forms of life together. But Luna had always remained apart, unable to find someone whose mind resonated with hers until now. David could feel Luna experiencing his own memories. As well, his childhood dreams of space exploration, his decision to become an astronomer, his quiet satisfaction with his solitary work. But through Luna's perspective, he could see something he had never recognized about himself: his willingness to remain alone, rather than settle for connections that weren't genuine. The sharing continued for what felt like hours, though David suspected that in the real world only minutes were passing. Gradually, he began to understand how Luna's people thought and felt. Their emotions were more complex than human emotions, encompassing concepts like joy, sadness, anticipation as a single feeling, or love, curiosity, protective hunger as another. When the connection finally ended, David found himself back in his chair, gasping as if he had been holding his breath. Luna was standing in front of him, but her appearance had changed again. She looked more human somehow, while still retaining her alien beauty. "What happened to you?" David asked. "The same thing that happened to you," Luna said. And David realized he could now hear her voice both in his head and through his ears. "We have shared something of ourselves with each other. You now carry a small part of my people's nature within you, and I carry part of your human nature within me." David stood up and looked at his hands. They looked the same, but he felt different, more aware of the energy flowing through everything around him, more sensitive to the connections between all living things. "Is this permanent?" David asked. "The memories will fade over time, but some of the changes will remain. You will never again see the universe quite the way you did before." David walked to the window and looked out at the desert. Even in the darkness, he could somehow sense the life force of every plant, every small animal, every. David woke up the next morning feeling like he was living in a completely different world. The consciousness sharing with Luna had left him changed in ways he was still discovering. Colors seemed brighter, sounds had more depth, and he could sense energy patterns in everything around him that he'd never noticed before. But more than the physical changes, David found himself thinking about Luna constantly, not just as an alien being or a scientific discovery, but as someone he genuinely cared about. The connection they had shared had shown him her loneliness, her hopes, and her fears. He understood now that she wasn't just studying humans. She was risking everything to find something her own people couldn't give her. As evening approached, David realized he was nervous in a way he'd never been before. This wasn't just excitement about meeting an alien anymore. He was nervous the way someone gets before an important conversation with someone they care deeply about. Luna appeared just as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. But something was different about her tonight. She seemed more focused, more determined. There was an energy around her that felt both powerful and uncertain. "David," Luna said as soon as she materialized in his control room, "I must tell you something important. Last night changed everything." "Changed how?" Luna began pacing around the small room, something David had never seen her do before. She seemed agitated, excited, and worried all at the same time. "The consciousness sharing we did was not just a test," Luna began. "Among my people, such deep mental connection only happens between beings who are perfectly compatible. It is how we choose our life partners." David's heart started beating faster. "Life partners?" "Yes, when two of my people share consciousness successfully, it means their minds can merge completely and permanently. They become two parts of a single, more complete being. It is the most important relationship in our culture." David sat down heavily in his chair. "Are you saying that what happened between us? I am saying that in thousands of years of life, I have never experienced a consciousness sharing as complete and natural as what we shared last night. Your mind merged with mine as if we had been created to fit together." Luna stopped pacing and looked directly at David. In her alien eyes, he could see emotions he was only beginning to understand: hope, fear, love, and something else that felt like desperate longing. "David," Luna said, her mental voice softer than he'd ever heard it, "I have made a decision. After careful evaluation and testing, after experiencing the connection between our minds, I have decided that I want to make you my mate." David felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. He stared at Luna, trying to process what she had just said. This incredible being, this representative of an advanced alien civilization, was asking him to become her life partner. "Hi, Luna. I don't know what to say," David stammered. "Say nothing yet," Luna replied. "First, you must understand what I am offering and what it would mean for both of us." Luna moved closer to David, and as she did, the air around them began to shimmer with that same energy he'd experienced during their consciousness sharing. "If you accept my proposal, you would need to leave Earth permanently. My people have technology that can modify your biology to survive in our environment. But the changes would be irreversible. You would no longer be entirely human." David's mind raced. What would I become? Something new. A hybrid being that combines the best of both our species. You would have access to our technology, our knowledge, our ways of experiencing the universe. But you would also retain your human creativity, your emotional depth, your unique way of solving problems. Luna paused, and David could sense her uncertainty. "But David, you must understand the magnitude of what I'm asking. You would be leaving behind everything you have ever known, your planet, your people, your entire way of life, and there would be no way to return." "What about you?" David asked. "What would this mean for you, for me?" "It would mean the end of my loneliness, for the first time in my very long life. I would have a true partner, someone whose consciousness complements mine perfectly. Together, we could create new forms of life, explore parts of the universe that neither of our species has ever seen." Luna's expression became more serious. "But I must also tell you that my choice is controversial among my people. Many believe that cross-species partnerships are dangerous, that they weaken our genetic purity. If you accept my proposal, we may face exile from my world as well." David stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the desert that had been his home for so long. The quiet, predictable life he had built here suddenly seemed very small compared to what Luna was offering. "Why me?" David asked. "Out of all the humans on Earth, why did you choose me?" Luna joined him at the window. "Do you remember what drew you to astronomy in the first place?" David thought back to his childhood, to the first time he had looked through a telescope and seen the rings of Saturn. "I wanted to find something bigger than myself. I wanted to know if we were alone in the universe." "Exactly. Most humans are content with their small lives, their local concerns. But you have always been reaching towards something greater. When I observed your thoughts during our tests, I saw someone who was already living between two worlds, the limited world of human experience and the vast possibility of what might exist beyond it." Luna turned to face him directly. "David, you have spent your entire adult life preparing for this moment, even though you didn't know it. Every night you spent alone in this desert, listening to signals from space, you were training yourself to be ready for contact with something beyond human understanding." David felt the truth of her words. His whole life had been leading to this moment. "But there's something else," Luna continued, and for the first time, David heard vulnerability in her voice. "In all my years of studying your species, I have never met a human whose mind felt like home to me. When we shared consciousness, I felt like I was finally complete. I felt like I had found the other half of myself." David looked at Luna, really looked at her. Beyond her alien appearance, he could see the being he had connected with so deeply, someone who, like him, had chosen a life of isolation in pursuit of something greater, someone who had risked everything to reach across the vastness of space. "Define connection, Luna," David said slowly. "What you're describing, is it love?" Luna was quiet for a long moment. "Your human word love is too simple for what I feel. Among my people, we have a concept that translates roughly as soul recognition, the instant knowing that another being is the perfect complement to your own consciousness. It is love, but it is also destiny, compatibility, and completion, all combined into something much deeper." David felt his own emotions swirling, fear, excitement, love, and something else that might have been that same soul recognition Luna was describing. "If I said yes," David asked, "what would happen next?" "First, I would need to return to my people and formally declare my intention. This would trigger a period of evaluation, where they would test both of us extensively. If we passed their tests, they would perform the biological modifications necessary for you to survive in our environment. And if we don't pass, Luna's expression darkened. Then we would be exiled from my world. And you would be forever changed but unable to return. To yours, we would have to find our own path among the stars. David realized that Luna was offering him everything he had ever dreamed of: contact with an advanced alien civilization, access to technology beyond imagination, the chance to explore the universe in ways no human ever had. But she was also asking him to give up everything he had ever known. How long do I have to decide? David asked. My people expect me to return soon with my final report. If I am going to declare you as my chosen mate, it must be within the next few days. David looked out at the desert one more time, then back at Luna. The being who had started as an impossible encounter had become the most important person in his life. Luna, David said, taking her hands in his, I need you to know something. What I feel for you, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced with another human. When we shared consciousness, I felt like I understood what it meant to be truly connected to another being. Luna's eyes began to glow brighter. Are you saying? I'm saying that I love you too. In whatever language, in whatever form, across whatever distance between our species, I love you. And if you'll have me, I want to spend whatever life I have left exploring the universe with you. Luna's expression transformed into something radiant. David, do you understand what you are agreeing to? I understand that I'm choosing you over everything else I've ever known. And that feels like the first truly right decision I've ever made. Luna moved closer to David, and when she spoke, her voice was filled with joy and relief. Then tomorrow night, I will return to my people and tell them that I have found my mate. And David, yes, thank you for being brave enough to reach across the stars to find me. As Luna began to fade with the approaching dawn, David realized that his old life was already over. Tomorrow, everything would change. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of change. He was ready for it. David didn't sleep at all that day. How could he? In a few hours, Luna would return to make their partnership official with her people, and his life as a human being on Earth would effectively end. He walked around his small living quarters, looking at his few possessions and trying to figure out what, if anything, he wanted to take with him into his new life. The strangest part was how right the decision felt. David had expected to feel more fear, more doubt about leaving everything behind. Instead, he felt a sense of completion, like a puzzle piece finally finding its proper place. He spent the day writing letters he would never send, explaining to his family and few friends what had happened to him. Not the truth, of course. No one would believe that. Instead, he wrote about taking a new research position in a remote location, where communication would be impossible. It was the best cover story he could manage. As evening approached, David found himself both excited and nervous. What if Luna's people rejected him? What if the biological modifications didn't work? What if he wasn't strong enough to handle life in an alien civilization? But beneath those worries was a deeper certainty. Whatever happened next, he wanted to face it with Luna. Luna appeared just after sunset, but she wasn't alone. 3 other beings materialized with her, each one similar to Luna, but distinctly different. David could immediately sense that these were members of Luna's species. In their natural forms, taller, more ethereal, with an authority that made the air around them vibrate with power. David, Luna said, her mental voice formal and careful. These are the evaluators. They have come to assess our compatibility and determine whether our partnership will be approved. The 3 alien beings studied David with an intensity that made him feel like they were looking through him rather than at him. When they spoke, their voices appeared in his mind. As a chorus of harmonized thoughts, human David, they said together, Luna has made an unprecedented request. Never in our history has one of our people chosen a mate from a primitive species. We must determine if this choice serves the greater good of our civilization. David took a deep breath and tried to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. I understand. What do you need to know? The evaluators exchanged what seemed like thousands of thoughts in an instant, then focused back on David. We will share consciousness with you as Luna did, but more deeply. If your mind cannot handle the connection, you will be damaged beyond repair. Are you willing to take this risk? David looked at Luna, whose expression was carefully neutral. But through their growing connection, he could feel her fear and hope. Yes, David said, I'm willing. What happened next was unlike anything David had experienced. Even with Luna, the three evaluators merged their consciousness with his simultaneously, and suddenly David felt like his mind was being examined from every possible angle. They explored his memories, his motivations, his deepest fears and desires. But more than that, they seemed to be testing the very fabric of his personality, looking for flaws or weaknesses that might make him incompatible with their species. The experience lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When it ended, David collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the intensity of having his consciousness thoroughly examined by beings far more advanced than himself. The evaluators conferred among themselves in that rapid-fire exchange of thoughts, then turned back to David and Luna. The results are unexpected, they said. This human's consciousness shows remarkable adaptability and strength. More importantly, his mental patterns are indeed highly compatible with Luna's. The connection between them is genuine and deep. David felt a surge of hope. But the evaluators weren't finished. However, they continued. Approving this partnership would set a precedent that could change our entire civilization. Other members of our species might begin seeking mates among primitive beings, weakening our genetic and cultural purity. Luna stepped forward, her own mental voice strong and determined. Honorable evaluators, with respect, our civilization has become stagnant. We have achieved great technological advancement, but we have lost much of our creativity and emotional depth. This human brings qualities that could strengthen us, not weaken us. You would risk exile for this belief. The evaluators asked. I would risk everything. Luna replied without hesitation. The evaluators were quiet for a long moment, and David could sense them communicating in ways too complex for him to follow. Finally, they reached a decision. Very well. We will approve this partnership on a trial basis. The human will undergo the necessary biological modifications and will be brought to our world. If, after one full cycle, both partners remain committed and their union proves beneficial rather than harmful, it will be made permanent. David felt like his heart might burst with relief and excitement. However, the evaluators continued. If the experiment fails, both of you will be exiled from our world. The human cannot return to his original form, so exile would mean wandering the galaxy as outcasts. We understand and accept those terms, Luna said immediately. David nodded. His agreement, though the weight of what he was accepting was almost overwhelming. Then let the modifications begin, the evaluators said. What followed was the strangest experience of David's life. The evaluators surrounded him with a field of energy that seemed to penetrate every cell of his body. He could feel himself changing. At a fundamental level, his DNA rewriting itself, his organs adapting to process different atmospheres, his brain developing new capabilities. The process was painless, but intense. David could feel himself becoming something new, something that was still essentially him, but expanded and enhanced in ways he couldn't fully understand. When it was over, David looked at his hands and saw that his skin had taken on a subtle luminescence similar to Luna's. His vision was sharper, his hearing more acute, and he could sense energy patterns all around him with startling clarity. How do you feel? Luna asked, and David realized he could now hear her voice both telepathically and audibly different. David said, surprised by the harmonic quality his own voice had taken on. But still me, just more. The evaluators examined David's transformation and seemed satisfied. The modifications are successful. You are now capable of surviving in our environment and may accompany Luna to our world. As the evaluators prepared to leave, they turned to David one final time. Human David, you are about to become the first of your species to join our civilization. This is an honor and a responsibility. Do not take it lightly. I won't, David promised. After the evaluators departed, Luna and David were left alone in the control room that had been the site of so many amazing discoveries over the past weeks. "Are you ready?" Luna asked. David looked around the room one last time, then at the desert beyond the windows. This place had been his home, his life, his entire world. But now it felt like a small stopping point on a much larger journey. "Yes?" David said, taking Luna's hand. "I'm ready." Luna smiled and began to glow brighter. "Then let me show you the universe." The world around them began to dissolve, replaced by streams of light and energy. David felt himself lifting away from Earth, away from everything he had ever known. But instead of fear, he felt an incredible sense of freedom and possibility. As they traveled through space at impossible speeds, Luna shared her thoughts with David. "You know, when I first came to your world, I was just looking for signs of intelligence. I never expected to find someone who would change my entire understanding of what was possible. I spent my whole life looking for proof that we weren't alone in the universe," David replied. "I just never imagined that finding it would mean leaving the universe I knew behind." "Do you regret it?" Luna asked. David looked at the brilliant alien landscape now appearing before them. Luna's world with its crystalline structures and energy-based life forms. That defied everything he thought he knew about existence. "No," David said with absolute certainty. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." As their feet touched the surface of Luna's world, David realized that his story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. He was no longer David, the lonely astronomer from Earth. He was David, the explorer, the bridge between two species, the first human to truly reach for the stars and find love waiting there. And as Luna led him toward their new life together, David knew that every night he had spent alone in that desert station had been worth it, because it had prepared him for this moment when he would never be alone again.